Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me once again as we wrap up our Indiana Jones month here, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing great.
Excellent.
Officially done have a job. Very excited about it.
There you go.
Summer vacation.
By your own choice.
By my choice.
Yeah.
By my choice.
Yeah. And Cameron Abbott, how you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on?
What is going on is today we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, wrapping up our month, as I said, of Indiana Jones. Obviously, Dial of Destiny comes out next week, but it won't be on Disney Plus for another couple months after that. So we will, I'm sure, revisit it when the time comes and kind of finalize our indie rankings then. But until then, the history lesson here for this one, originally released May 22nd, 2008. I remember very distinctly seeing this one in theaters a couple times because this was right after I'd graduated college and I was spending the summer working at the Santa Fe Opera as part of like their summer program with my partner at the time. And so we went and saw Indiana Jones there, like out in Santa Fe.
Yes.
Other releases of the time we had going back to April 18th of that year, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Classic.
April 25th, Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay, which I included
Not a classic.
No, not a classic, but I included it since one of our earlier ones had like a Cheech and Chong in the related nearby. Then we had the kickoff of the Marvel Cinematic Universe on May 2nd with Iron Man. A week later, a complete opposite end of the spectrum with Speed Racer on May 9th. The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian was May 16th. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull here was May 22nd. Week after that, we had Sex and the City, finally making its way to the big screen. June 6th brought us Kung Fu Panda.
Hell yeah.
A week later, on June 13th, we had the M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, one of those widely maligned Shyamalan films of the era, and the second installment in the MCU right off the bat there with The Incredible Hulk, which is now also on Disney Plus as of like last week.
I think so,
yeah. June 20th brought us Get Smart and
The
Love
Get
Guru.
Smart's so good.
June 27th, we had Wall-E and the film Wanted, which I remember seeing ads day after day after day while I was watching like G4 and Spike TV in my
what a great pull
in my housing for the Santa Fe Opera, and just always remember the like curve the bullet like part of the ad. Never saw the movie, but I do I remember the trailer a ton.
You could take it or leave it.
Yeah.
It's better than the comic book, I'll tell you that.
July 2nd brought us the film Hancock with Will Smith.
Yeah.
July 11th was Hellboy 2, The Golden Army.
Oh, okay.
And July 18th, the 1-2 punch of The Dark Knight and Mamma Mia, with a wonderful case of counter-programming that paid off pretty well for Mamma Mia.
I'll tell you what, man, this was a summer for me. What a time. What a time to be alive.
There you go.
Yeah, this I think at the very least for me and Cam probably was like such a peak just every weekend you're going to the movies with your friends.
Yeah.
Because I mean I was going into my junior year of high school here. So like I was just going to the movies all the time. I like have very vivid memories of watching so many of the movies we just named in theaters, from Forgetting Sarah Marshall all the way down to Dark Knight, and obviously Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for sure have lots of memories of. And so it was a great summer of movies.
Yep.
This is in particularly like, this is what's so interesting. So this is the summer after I graduated high school.
So you're still right in it.
Yeah. It was kind of like countdown as like my friends and I were all getting ready for everybody just like to go off. And just like some of them moving into the dorms, some of like everybody's leaving off on this next chapter of their life, except me. And so I was just like counting down the days and just like watching all these movies. And they had just opened the Cinemark at Mesa Riverview. And so, like, all of a sudden I had a movie theater right by my house. And I would we would go to it all the time as a family. I would go with friends. It was an awesome time. Logan's Steakhouse was down there, or sorry, Logan's Roadhouse.
Logan's
which
Roadhouse
still had some of the best chicken fingers you could ever find. Just a great little area. Like we went there for my 18th birthday right before I graduated. It was an awesome time. And seeing movies like every weekend was the best.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Now that we're in the 2000s, Box Office Mojo doesn't completely have terrible records anymore. So we can go back to our old fun breakdown of domestic gross versus worldwide gross here in 2008. The domestic gross of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a whopping 300. Well, all right. Why are the numbers already changing? When I wrote this a couple days ago, it was 318.3 million, but now I'm seeing 317.1 million on the domestic box office from Box Office Mojo. Close enough. So where do you think that falls in the hierarchy of that year's records?
So this is an easy year because everyone knows what number one was this year, right? The Dark Knight fucking made $1 billion at the box office, right, worldwide. So I mean, we know it's not number one. Looking at the rest of this list, I think it could be pretty high, right? Because like this is obviously pre the MCU existing in any way. So like Iron Man did very good, I'm sure, but like it wasn't making like crazy gangbuster numbers like they'd start to make as it went on. Obviously, Incredible Hulk definitely didn't. Forgetting Sarah Marshall's an R-rated comedy. Harold and Kumar for sure not. Speed Racer didn't land. I could see Chronicles of Narnia maybe being somewhat decent, like top 10.
Here's the thing you're going to run into. Mamma Mia was so successful that they brought it back with a sing-along version. To me, that's...
WALL-E 2, that's like peak Pixar era as well.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm probably going to call it number 4.
I will say just real quick. I realized it was 317.1 million the other day when I wrote it. I just mixed it up with the movie that was right above it at 318.3.
Okay, so
it's very close to something else. Yeah.
The other thing I want to pose to you, Cameron, is because this got us like I think last week or the week before. Was there any huge fall movie that year that's not on the summer list that he just gave, but that could have been big? And that's what I'm trying to think of, like what happened. There's a Bond movie in 2008. It's Quantum of Solace, but like
I was gonna say, I'm looking at the overall list, and I'm saying there's definitely one that Logan should be able to pull.
But Quantum was like sort of the redheaded stepchild of the Daniel Craig era to a degree, right? Like it didn't have the same numbers as like Casino or Skyfall or even Spectre, which is bad but still did really well. But it's still a Bond movie, right? So that probably made at least 500 or 600 million worldwide, domestic, right? So you said 4 for Indy.
Yeah, I think
Indy domestic was $317.1 million.
And you think it's number 4 overall, Cameron? I kind of like that pick. I think 4 or 5 feels good to me, right?
And I think Quantum of Solace is probably just above it.
I'm going to say, you said 4, I'll say 5, just so we don't have a tie. But yeah, I think it's right in that wheelhouse. Domestic.
Number 10. This is probably the most bonkers one of any that I've seen here. Horton Hears a Who.
Oh, that's right. That came out. That was
shout out to 2008, man. I love
2008
it.
Was a weird year, but it was a good.
Yeah.
Horton Hears a Who was $154.5 million. Right above it, number 9 with 165.2 million. Quantum of Solace.
Ooh.
Yeah. See, that makes sense.
As you said, yeah, it was quite down there. A surprising number 8 spot given where this franchise would go, with $170.6 million. We have the first Twilight film. Number 7 with $175.7 million, Madagascar Escape to Africa.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that, and Moto Moto is still quoted in my family today.
Jumping up into the $200 million bracket with
it's going to be really high
$215 million,
then,
we
I
have
think.
Kung Fu Panda at number 6.
Yeah. Okay.
Wall-E comes in at number 5 with $223.7
Oh, it's going to be really high, I think, Cameron.
Number
It's going to get to
4
317.
with just under $228 million, Hancock, proving that Will Smith still had the box office pull.
Even though half
that
that
was like
movie
the
is
end of his
atrocious.
golden age, I think.
Yeah. Number 3 with $317.1 million, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom
This
of
is a
the Crystal
huge
Skull.
jump then. Oh my god, it's like $100 million jump from 4 to 3. Wow.
Just above it with $318.3 million, Iron Man.
Yeah.
And yes, number 1 with a bullet, $530.9 million domestic, is The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it was, that's what I thought. Because I think, when The Dark Knight came out, it was, it still is one of the highest grossing movies ever, but in the time it was one of the highest grossing movies ever. So yeah, I knew it was going to shatter everything.
Yep. So on the
and he was
worldwide gross
third.
numbers, we have $790.7 million is how much it brought in. So where do you guys think that lands worldwide?
Dark Knight's still number 1, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man, I feel like it would still be very high up there. I feel like Twilight maybe got helped more by international.
No, much less likely. Twilight, I don't think had
Quantum for sure.
Quantum for sure. I think it
by international, but it was so low to begin with that I don't think it made up the gap.
I think I would actually probably say it probably stays at number 3.
Well,
I don't hate it.
Also, on the just out of the top 10 on the domestic side, at number 11 was Sex and the City, and at number 12 was Mamma Mia.
Oh, okay.
Incredible Hulk was number 14. But,
I don't hate Cameron's pick. I'll push and say it's third as well, worldwide.
Number 10 actually staying at number 11 worldwide, Sex and the City. Number 10 worldwide, The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian jumps up on the list with
it's a great book.
$419.6 million. Wall-E drops down to number 9 worldwide with $521 million. Iron Man drops all the way down to number 8.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought.
Million. Quantum of
It
Solace
was so heavy domestic then. Wow.
just above it with 589 worldwide.
Yeah, it's a huge international.
Madagascar Escape to Africa sits in there again with number 6 with $603.9 million worldwide. Mamma Mia makes the big jump up to number 5 here.
Yeah, good for them.
Hells yeah.
With $609.8 million.
Wow, good for
ABBA
Mamma
is
Mia.
an international band.
That's
and
true.
It makes sense that the musical based off their music would do better internationally.
Yep.
Good for them.
Hancock stays at number 4 with $629.4
Shout out to Will Smith,
million.
man.
Kung Fu Panda makes the jump up to number 3 with
good for them, too.
$631 million.
So Kingdom goes up to number 2.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull jumps up to number 2 with $790 million, and The Dark Knight just over $1 billion. $1 billion point 003.
Hell yeah.
$1,000,003 million there. So yes,
I love this
still,
game. This is my favorite thing to do.
as much maligned critically and among the fan base as Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is, people still showed up for it. So
we'll get to it.
There you go. Continuing on, we have a runtime here of 2 hours and 4 minutes. In the Lucasfilm timeline of things, as we kind of touched on a little bit last week, Lucasfilm really started slowing things down after Last Crusade.
Hope you like Star Wars.
Yeah. They had Radioland Murders in 94, and then Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 in 99, 2002, and 2005, respectively. I guess also in there, they were doing like the re-releases in the 90s. Like I remember going and seeing
the special editions
of the films in theaters. And we get Kingdom of the Crystal Skull here in 2008, as well as Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which we covered.
Which is just a glorified TV pilot.
Exactly, yes. But we cover that in our Summer of Star Wars. 2012 would bring George Lucas's passion project Red Tails to the screen.
Mm-hmm.
2015 was Strange Magic and Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So Red Tails would have also been like the last of like Lucas owned
Lucas's.
Lucasfilm before the Disney acquisition.
It's pretty good, actually, too. I don't know if anyone's seen Red Tails. It's pretty good.
Roll call. Our director for the last time here in the series, Steven Spielberg, once again. Of course, having touched on stuff like Jaws and E.T. and Jurassic Park and Schindler's List and Catch Me If You Can and West Side Story and The Fabelmans.
We just got to do a like Spielberg watch at some point in time. We could just that's gonna be a fun one. Catch Me If You Can is so good too. Jesus Christ, that movie's so good.
David Koepp is the screenplay writer on this one. He kind of probably made his big breakout with a cult classic from my youth that I remember like watching the tape over and over again, Death Becomes Her. But then he was also the screenplay writer, or one of the screenplay writers on Jurassic Park.
Hell yeah.
Carlito's Way. He did
Such a movie.
the first Mission Impossible film, which is weird to realize that was in 1996 as we come into like, what, in Mission Impossible 7 or 8 this year?
One of my favorite things about Mission Impossible that I talk about all the time is that like it's such a weird series because there's like pretty routinely like these like 5-year gaps in all the movies. And so it's like this really interesting sort of evolution of like how films are made too, and like the stunt work and everything. It's really interesting.
Yep. David Koepp also wrote on The Lost World, the second Jurassic Park film, Panic Room, the original Spider-Man film.
Heck yeah.
A War of the Worlds in 2005, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull here. After this, he would go on to write Angels and Demons, the second of the Dan Brown novel films. He wrote the much maligned and dark universe killing Mummy 2017. And he is credited on the upcoming Dial of Destiny. So he's back for that too.
Woof.
That's going to be the best pull we make today.
Joining Lucas on a story credit for this one, Jeff Nathanson also helped provide the story. His big breakout was Speed 2 Cruise Control, but he also wrote Rush Hour 2, Catch Me If You Can, as mentioned earlier, The Terminal, Rush Hour 3, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull here, and we talked about him recently when we discussed Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Whoops.
As well as the 2019 Lion King, which I still think is
I love how
because he didn't write any of that movie. the writers of the 90s version wrote that movie.
My favorite thing about Trevor is probably how much visceral hatred he has for the live action Lion King. A, being called the live action Lion King, and B, anyone getting any credit for it not just being the same thing as the 90s Lion King. I really enjoy it.
If Trevor could, he would try to get away with by saying that even the voice cast was the same. I mean, that's how much he hates it.
Only James Earl Jones. My issue,
pretty important role though.
My issue on like the writing applies to all of the Disney remakes. I think a lot of those get like a writing credit, and it's like you added a scene to this movie.
Right.
And it's the only reason like the original creators and writers don't get credit is because of like obscure WGA or Animation Guild rules that basically say they can't be credited for the same thing again. So, but yes, I do not like The Lion King 2019. Despite the fact that it made a couple $1 billion as well.
I heard it here first.
Our cast of characters here. Harrison Ford, of course, returning as Indiana Jones.
Harrison Ford.
We've run through his credits plenty of times. Kate Blanchett joins this time around as Irina Spalko. She, of course, had been in the Lord of the Rings films.
That's right.
She did Kingdom of the Crystal Skull here. Curious Case of Benjamin Button. The Russell Crowe Robin Hood. Where she, I believe, was Maid Marian. She joined the How to Train Your Dragon series in the second and third films. She, of course, was Hela in Thor Ragnarok. Ocean's 8. She was in last year's film Tar, where she earned a Best Actress nomination. And she is in the upcoming, presuming it actually still comes out, Borderlands movie based on the video game franchise, where she's playing the character of Lilith. So we'll see what happens with that.
She's also in The Aviator, where she plays Katharine Hepburn.
Yes.
And is my favorite Kate Blanchett role, I think. She's so good as Katharine Hepburn.
My favorite is Hela, but that's also because she was hella hot in that movie.
All right, Cameron. Karen Allen makes her return as Marion.
Hell yeah.
As we discussed back in Raiders, she'd been in Animal House, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Glass Menagerie, Scrooged, The Sandlot, and now Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I do want to say, because none of us, I think, mentioned it the first time around, but she, like, within so quick of her being on the screen, she, like, flashed it, and I just had to say, her smile is truly like a megawatt smile. Like, it is so, like, it lights up the screen so much. She's got such a great smile. And yeah, shout to that as well.
There you go. Shia LaBeouf in here as Mutt Williams.
Yes, he is.
Having been in Even Stevens on the Disney Channel, where he got his break, followed by the film Holes. He was in iRobot, which is a favorite of mine. Of course,
Also mine.
He was in the Transformers series, and then he was here in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and then kind of went a little berserk for a little while there. And he started having a resurgence a couple years back, I remember, with the films Honey Boy and The Peanut Butter Falcon.
Both are great.
Ray Winston as Mac was in the Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. He was in The Departed, Beowulf, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull here. After this, he would go on to be in Rango, Snow White and the Huntsman, not Slow White, despite my misspellings. And then recently, he was in the much maligned Cats film. He was the bad guy in the Black Widow movie. And he was in last year's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. John Hurt in here as Professor Oxley, having been previously in projects like Midnight Express, Alien, The Elephant Man, 1984. He was Ollivander in the Harry Potter series, both like the first film and the last two. Big old gap in between, where we didn't need to see Ollivander, but he did come back. He was in the Hellboy movies here, obviously here in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. After this, he would be in the Snowpiercer film, and he, of course, made
the War Doctor.
A turn as the War Doctor in the Doctor Who 50th anniversary special.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
He's fantastic. Yeah. Love John Hurt.
Jim Broadbent in here as Dean Charles Stanforth, who I will always remember from Moulin Rouge. But he was also in Gangs of New York, Chronicles of Narnia, Hot Fuzz, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
That's right. He is in Hot Fuzz.
He was in the Paddington films, and he was in a few episodes late in the Game of Thrones series.
I feel like I've said it every time we've come across it, but God, I just want to watch. I just want an excuse to watch and talk about Hot Fuzz. That movie is so good. Absolutely love it.
Igor Zhishkin plays Dovchenko. He was in the Command and Conquer games, going back to those in the 90s. He did cameos or like one-offs in shows like Alias, Burn Notice, and Chuck. And then obviously here in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's always kind of that like super Russian henchman, tough guy kind of thing. And then lastly, just a couple of shout outs that I always enjoy like seeing as like weird little pop-ups in this. Alan Dale playing General Ross was probably notably Charles Widmore in the series Lost, and Neil Flynn playing Agent Smith here, of course, the janitor from Scrubs. All right, moving over to All Out of Bubblegum for our body count. How many kills do we think we have in this one? I will say we are up from 50 in the prior film.
I mean, there's a nuclear blast, but that only kills the like 4 guys in a car. But they gun down like a whole patrol station beforehand. The whole scene with them fighting in like the jungle. Let's say.
Don't forget 76. There's the temple where they mow down all the inhabitants.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bodies in this.
I'm going to say 90. I'm going to say 90 people die.
I don't know if it's that many. I will probably go and say 75.
That's what I said. You made me change it. So if it's 75, I'm going to be so. Trevor, what is it?
So I will point out, I actually like made some modifications on this one because All Out of Bubblegum like counts Henry Jones Sr. and stuff, and I'm like, no, they did not die in this movie.
They didn't die in the movie. What? No.
So their count was 63, but taking away the Alien Mummy, Henry Jones Sr., and Marcus Brody that they counted. It is actually 60. 60
Okay.
deaths in this
Okay.
one. So of the 60 there, how many of those belong to Indy?
Not many.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Does he kill anyone in the opening sequence? I don't think so, right? Like, I don't think any of the Russians he kills there.
No, because he's
Um,
mostly running away, and then he rocket cars
Right.
away with the guy who ends up surviving with him.
Yeah, because he dies in like the ant pile.
Yeah, I think he might kill.
He kills he blows the
Yeah,
dart
he
in
does
the
the
one
reverse
guy's
blow
mouth.
dart.
He gets that guy.
Yeah.
That fucking brutal one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
so he
go
gets
safe and
that.
say 2.
I think it's higher than that. I'll say Indy kills. Because I'm just thinking like the Amazon shit. I'll say Indy kills 8, right? Maybe he like knocks one of the cars off of like chase him like that.
So there's another one. I had to fudge the numbers that All Out of Bubblegum has because All Out of Bubblegum says Indy accidentally knocks over some mannequins, which sets off a nuclear bomb that incinerates 3 Russian soldiers. I'm like, no. Indy knocking over the mannequins had nothing to do with dropping
With the
that
nuclear
nuke bomb.
explosion.
They were doing a nuclear test.
The nuke was going to go off.
I like how that's
That was the
connective
entire
tissue
point of
there.
at the very beginning when they're like, "Hey, we can't let anybody on site."
Yeah.
It's because they were doing nuclear testing. Like,
Yeah.
It's because they might knock over the dummies. Come on.
oh my gosh, that's so dumb.
It's a wild that they counted that. So they gave him 21, but without those 3 Russians that die in the nuke,
Wow,
it is
he
18.
kills 17. 18.
The kills are we will also before we dive into a breakdown of the kills, I also have Marion. How many kills do we think Marion racks up in this one?
The fact that she's on the list makes me think she's got a couple, but I'm trying to think.
I think do not know how many people died in the jungle chase scene. Is what I think. I'm
Right, that's like such a big issue for me too. Like, it's so hard to get. Oh, I wonder with Marion if it's counting no one in the chase, but when she like jumps off the thing and lands in the tree, and then it snaps back and Trevor's not his head.
That's exactly what it's counting. So how many die in that moment?
I think it's like 3. I'll say that fall off to their death. I guess I'm gonna say 3 that she kills.
I'll say 5 total.
Logan is right. It is 3.
Just those 3. Okay.
Just those 3.
Hell yeah.
You see of like the handful of soldiers, you see 3 specifically fall off to their deaths.
Technically, they could survive, I guess, into the water, but it's also that.
Yeah. And given the established physics of people surviving,
exactly
giant
why I
falls
said
into
that.
water. Yeah.
Exactly why I said that.
So the opening sequence, I like Ike. The Russian soldiers shoot the 5 military personnel there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Indy crashes a jeep into some crates in Area 51, killing 5 Russian soldiers. And then Indy kicks Colonel Zivchenko onto the controls of the jet engine, which burns 5 soldiers, 5 Russian soldiers alive right there.
Right.
And Mac ducks just out of the way.
That's a great,
I did not
that's a
realize
great
there was that
brutal
many. I
death
thought
as
there was
well.
like only 2 or 3 there.
Yeah.
That's who I was counting, with also the blow dart guy. But
yeah. So then it says, oh, like Doomtown and Indy's house. It's like, no, none of those are real things that well, I guess yes, the 3 Russian soldiers do get incinerated,
but it's
via
not
a nuke,
Indy's
but it's
fault,
not Indy's fault. In the cemetery, as you both identified, Indy blows that poison dart into the Nazca warrior's mouth. In the jungle chase, this is where a lot of Indy's kills come in, because Indy shoots the jungle cutter with the RPG, blowing up the Russian soldier driving that vehicle, and one of the blades goes off and just destroys one of the Russian vehicles, killing 5 soldiers. A Russian soldier is eaten alive by the Sifu ants. Indy punches Colonel Zivchenko there, causing him to fall into the ants, which eat him alive. Marion drives off a cliff, drives off a tree with a jeep, causing it to lash back and hit 3 Russian soldiers, causing them to fall off the cliff to their deaths. And then in Akator, shout out to you, Cameron, for identifying that 16 Uga warrior bodies are seen by the Russian, having been shot by the Russian soldiers. 5 Russian soldiers are pulled into the vortex, killing them. The Akator aliens overload Spalko's mind with their powers, causing her brain to fry, killing her. And Mac lets go of Indy's whip, causing him to be pulled into a vortex, killing himself. I almost was like, who's Mac's kill in this? but it's just he lets himself go. So yeah, that is our body breakdown here. And then diving into some trivia before we get to our thoughts. Harrison Ford was adamant that he got to wield Indy's famous whip in this film. Paramount executives wanted the weapon to be computer generated because of new movie safety rules, but Ford branded the rule, quote, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford also convinced David Koepp to include more jokes about Indy's age in the script, believing they would help reduce the American paranoia about aging. He also refused to dye his hair for the role, arguing Indy's appeal wasn't in his youth, but in his imagination and resourcefulness. Quote, my ambition in action is to have the audience look straight in my face and not the back of a stuntman's head. I hope to continue that no matter how old I get.
Shout out, man.
Hell yeah.
He's so great.
The Akator throne room, designed by Guy Hendricks Diaz, keeps up an Indiana Jones tradition by having C-3PO and R2-D2 etched into one of the yellow tiles, and E.T. into another. According to the book The Complete Making of Indiana Jones, the characters can be found somewhere in all 4 Indiana Jones movies. Originally, Indiana was was to be up against an uprising of ex-Nazis, but Steven Spielberg felt he could not treat the Nazis lightly after directing Schindler's List, and Harrison Ford felt they had plumb-worn Nazis out. George Lucas also felt that the 1950s decade would have to take into account the Cold War, and when he heard that Joseph Stalin had been interested in crystal skulls, he made the Soviets the script's villains. Of course, obviously, we're going back to the Nazi well in Dial of Destiny next week.
No Spielberg involvement, though, to be fair.
Very
Not
true.
the director.
Yep. The girl who punches Mutt Williams in the diner scene is Sasha Spielberg, daughter of director Steven and Kate Capshaw.
Oh, that is fun, actually.
When Professor Harold Oxley is auto-writing, the Mayan symbols he's drawing in the notebook with one hand were actually done by an expert in Mayan script seated directly behind Hurt. It is the expert's arm doing the writing instead of Hurt.
Huh,
I remember
that's cool.
I remember specifically watching this time around and like seeing him do the writing and being like, wow, like John Hurt is just like completely looking up and not paying attention at all. What's he doing? Good for him. And so I read that and I was like, oh,
I thought they did something like
Movie magic.
I thought I saw something like wonky happening with like the around the drawing, but I guess it's like it just was a different arm that I was noticing. Because it didn't look like John Hurt. I don't know. I just thought they did. I thought it was like CG or something. They did something for that, but I guess I'm totally wrong. They had a real person doing it from behind.
Yep. Pulled this one in specifically for you, Logan, to prepare for her role of Arena Spalko. Kate Blanchett learned defense and, during filming, practiced karate. She based her performance on Rosa Klebb from Russia with Love, who also has a stern manner and a bob-cut hairdo. The story, set in 1957, as India is being forced to find an object in Hangar 51 repository, it is mentioned that the Russians are looking for something he found 10 years earlier, or at least investigated 10 years earlier, obviously referring to the infamous 1947 incident where some say real alien crash-landed nearby and was covered up by the military. Indy's story to the feds corroborates how secretive his involvement was, indeed, with the incident. Disappointed fans introduced the line, nuke the fridge, to the colloquial English language as a replacement for jump the shark, referring to the scene where Indy survives the nuclear explosion by climbing into a fridge. Both terms refer to a series having surpassed its peak and getting close to absurdity. According to David Koepp, the fridge scene was already in the third draft of the screenplay, which was written by Frank Darabont, and he liked it so much that he kept it in the final draft. When Indy is referring to being kidnapped by Pancho Villa, he's actually referring to an episode of The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones titled Spring Break Adventure, starring Sean Patrick Flannery.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, nice little callback there. And then I believe this is the last big, bulky one. There were no less than 3 major drafts written for this movie, for the final rewrites by David Koepp and Jeff Nathanson. First draft was written back in 1993 by Jeb Stewart, who was recommended to George Lucas by Harrison Ford while working on The Fugitive. It was subtitled Saucermen from Mars and featured many of the plot elements used in the movie, including the Doomtown nuclear sequence, launch bay test fight, the jungle, Russian enemies, as well as Indy getting married in the end to a fellow scientist called Dr. Molly. The second draft, written by Jeffrey Boehm in 1995, simply called Indy 4, had Indiana searching for Noah's Ark. Boehm's draft contains elements that were used in the final movie, including having Marion back, Indiana having a son called Abner, and who was described as a geek, aliens, and the main object was a crystal skull. This draft could have been used if the movie was released in 1996, but it was shelved at that time because, according to Steven Spielberg, of the release of Independence Day, which also obviously contained aliens. Third major draft by Frank Darabont, subtitled City of Gods, was very similar to the final movie, with Marion in it, but it also had Oxley in it, but removes Mutt. Steven Spielberg reportedly loved the script. According to Darabont, he called it the greatest script he'd read since Raiders of the Lost Ark. But Lucas rejected it for reasons not disclosed. Koepp looked at all of his movie's previous drafts and kept what he felt were good ideas. Tried not to make his work a fan script, avoiding any trivial references to the previous movies. He noted that the story would have to acknowledge Ford's and Jones's age, and also aimed for a mix of comedy and adventure from the first movie, trying to make it less dark than the second movie, and yet less comic than the third. Plot elements from all three drafts were used in the final script. So yeah, I saw a lot of trivia that was basically like, here's previous ideas, and the going all the way back, Saucermen from Mars was like a running potential name for the movie.
In the making of documentary for the film, and I think I've talked about this maybe off the pod before to you, Trev. It's really funny because it is basically there's a whole 5-10 minute sequence that is just it basically cut in between Spielberg, Lucas, and another one of the producers just being after Last Crusade, I was done. It was the Last Crusade, and Spielberg is very adamant about that, and Lucas is like, I really like the character. I wanted to do more stories with him, and that inherent Lucas just wanted to go back and do more indie stories, and Spielberg being like, I did that. I'm done. I want to do more serious stuff now. And then Spielberg is like, eventually George convinced me to maybe we should do another one. It could be fun. But the one rule I gave him was no aliens. And it cuts to Lucas and him being like, so I wanted to do aliens. And it just the way it goes back and forth between you guys, and it's just a slow 2-decade-long story of Lucas just getting Spielberg to capitulate on all of the one rule line in the sand things he had. And it's really funny. It's then when you get to the very end and it's them going, what should the name of the movie be? And it's and again, it's Spielberg just being like, I don't want it to be anything dumb. And it's Lucas being like, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. What does that mean? And him just being like, I just thought it sounded nice, honestly. And it's so fun. It's such a great look into what that friendship seems like it actually is to me. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I saw a clip making the rounds that was a lot of kind of that in the idea of Spielberg being very adamant, I never want to do an Indiana Jones with aliens. And yeah, obviously. And then here at the end of this one, obviously we get they're not spacemen. They're interdimensional beings, as point of fact. When John Hurt finally comes to.
I will say it. The first time I watched it, I hated the aliens thing, but after knowing a lot more about 50s pulp novels, the way that 40s pulp novels were very much in the vein of what we saw from the first three movies. 30s and 40s pulp novels, 50s pulp. If you're going to be telling a story in the 50s, that's a pulp 50s movie. It's
B sci-fi.
Right. B sci. Yeah, it's going to be B sci-fi.
Right.
Right. It is going to be what it is.
Yeah.
Their inspiration is, that's the one thing you can say for Spielberg and Lucas, is that they really embrace what are the inspirations of their movies, whether it's the first way being the 30s kind of serials, or this being a B, schlocky sci-fi horror film, and they really embrace it and bring it into the modern era, I think, in really fun ways. But it is unabashedly the movies they grew up watching and loving, and there's a certain level of I think fun and enjoyment in seeing that updated to a modern at the time lens.
Yeah. So as we discuss, how does it hold up? One of the things I will kick us off with is from the jump, I still loathe all the prairie dog stuff. It is indicative of the things I don't like in this movie, of it's over the top CG just for the sake of CG, that doesn't add anything to this movie. And so much of my frustration on this movie is that we lose the physical, that the reality that we had in the original trilogy for schlocky CG and iffy sci-fi stuff. That said, I didn't hate it nearly as much this time around.
Mhm.
Like going in with mediocre expectations. It's still not a great Indiana Jones movie, but it has enough fun action and adventure. And there are a lot of elements that I'm like, this movie, weirdly, Cameron and I talked about this a little bit with The Flash recently. This movie is not as bad as The Flash in that like it loses me from the beginning and then has like a hard time just never getting me back in. Like it loses me at the beginning, but it wins me back over. But then it like loses me again, but then it wins me back over, and then it loses me again, and it's just like it's that throughout.
Mhm.
Like it's I hate the prairie dog stuff. I hate the nuke the fridge thing. I hate
Mhm.
um the like three waterfalls and just the absurdity of like, oh, they would have been dead after each of those. And then I really, really hate the worst crime I think this movie has. Not even the aliens. It is the swinging through the like vines with the monkeys bit that Mutt has.
Mm.
Like that. I'm just like, I don't. That's sure that is 50s pulp. That is not fun for me. That is just goofy and stupid. But like I enjoy the Mutt and Indy relationship that we get. I enjoy Indy getting reunited with Marion. I think John Hurt is like wasted in this movie, which is sad. Just kind of being his, spouting off gibberish for most of the movie, and then like comes to for the last like two lines of the film.
Mhm.
Um, Kate Blanchett is fine as Spalko. I don't think like she has. I don't think she's given a ton to do. Um,
Mhm.
and like apart from the vine swinging through the jungle bit, I like a lot of the jungle chase.
Mm.
Like I think there are some fun beats in there. I think there's fun beats as Andy and Mutt are like driving through and trying to escape
Mm.
the
Mhm.
Russians that are on their tail and stuff like that. So yeah, like there are beats and moments of this that I'm like, oh, there's some fun ideas there, and then there are others that I'm just like, oh, this is there are some very painful things there. Cameron, you said this was only your probably second time watching it.
Yeah, I have not seen it since I saw it in theaters. It was how does it hold up? I think it actually holds up better for me now than it did back then.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mhm.
went in expecting a very different kind of movie, and I got, I think, real hurt over at the time. Like this is gonna sound so freaking dumb that now that I knew it was gonna sound dumb before I said it. It's gonna sound even worse now. Um, I was really upset by them introducing aliens and leaving the Judeo-Christian mythology of Christianity and Judaism from Raiders and Crusade.
Because again, you hadn't seen Temple of Doom by this point.
Nope, I hadn't seen Temple of Doom by that point.
Yeah, that's definitely still stupid.
Oh no, I saw Temple of Doom once, and I was like, yeah, but that's like heathen gods. The realm of God was still in effect. Looking back at it, I was like, wow, that was a really dumb hang up for me to have. Um, that being said, it's this movie I think is it is, I think I'm with you a lot, Trevor, where it loses me and then it wins me over. It loses me with the fridge and Nuketown. It wins me back over right away when he was being a professor again. And we are right after that, actually. Sorry, before he's a professor again, with the whole Red Scare angle that they take on that with the beginning. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm loving this. This is
Yeah, there's like so many like that scene of him and the agents is obviously like so much like a
a total Red Scare moment, and like the FBI
oh, a
investigating.
callback to Raiders.
Oh, callback to Raiders.
The
Yeah,
scene we all loved from Raiders.
yeah, and it's such a good one where they're introducing this and everything, but also I love that it's a army dude pops in and he goes, "Do you know how many medals this guy's won? Do you know how incredible he is?" And it goes back to like just how bad the government got about being afraid of the Russians. And
And even that is like a nice nod to fill in the blanks. Like the last time we saw Indy was still before World War II.
yeah, so like what did Indy do during World War
exactly,
II? Yeah.
like there is that sentiment of like, oh, he was an analyst or a spy or whatever. Like he was working as probably taking his skills and his field expertise, and working out there with Mac
Yeah,
and
Mac
whatnot.
being MI6, him being SIS at the time, pre CIA.
I think SSA,
Sorry, SSA. Sorry, yeah, Secret Service agent. Anyway,
strategic, special strategic. I don't know,
whatever
whatever it
SSA.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that he talks about that, and that also sets up Mac and him being like, why did they get captured by the Russians? Because they were noted spies during the World War II, and it's really cool that they bring in this element of like we kind of saw like we know what it's like when James Bond is a spy, but what is a spy in like 50s movies and 50s pulp? It's perfect. It's your classic 50s spy is somebody who was like a secret war person during World War II, that builds their credentials. Like it does such a great job of also reinventing Indy as an older character, and who's been aged and dated and not taken as seriously anymore. And I think that it's great that they also bring up like, yeah, people who were, and it also is a note of to real history, people who were war heroes during World War II, come the 50s during the Red Scare, all of a sudden they were like possible traitors because, well, you have connections to Russian and East German. It's like, yeah, because I was a spy for the government doing that. Well, we can't trust you now. Like there's literally volumes upon volumes of biographies of incredible human beings, incredible like patriots to the United States who were maligned and maliciously had their reputations and lives destroyed by this political motivated Red Scare, and getting to see a taste of that. Also, better dead than red rally going on at the university. Also bring up shout out to some of Lucas's earlier works, where it was greasers versus jocks. Like that was such a fun note too. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of things now that I know Lucas's filmography a lot better, Spielberg's filmography a lot better from their early time and like their early works, and kind of coming into it now. I enjoy this movie a lot more than I used to, and I was really surprised in a lot of ways how much I liked it coming into this. So it held up better for me now.
Right.
That way, to that point though, CGI is still trash. Mid 2000 CGI will always be trash. It's garbage.
Mm-hmm. Just because it was bugging me. OSS. The Office for
Strategic Service. Yeah.
That. Logan, what did you think of this one? You saw this a bunch in the theaters, as you've touched on many a time. This was the movie you've probably seen in theaters most in your life. How do you think this one holds up?
Yeah, like you said, I've seen this movie so many times in theaters. All my friends wanted to see it, so we ended up seeing it a bunch of times separately. But it's one that I haven't seen a bunch since then. I think that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is a really interesting movie in a lot of ways because it is sort of a like historically important film, because it's really one of the very first like prominent like sequel series and continuation stories we'd had, right? Like this is before, it sort of proliferated and became everything. It's before Fuller House and the Boy Meets World shows and all that kind of stuff. But it's also before like we started doing like sequel movies all over the place, right? Like in 2008, we hadn't really done that yet as a thing, right? Like we weren't rebooting everything or continuing everything in the way we were now. And so I think part of the reason that it was so maligned at the time was because it was sort of one of the first out of the gate to do this sort of like 19-year later sequel story. And I think when you kind of get to compare it against everything else, I compared a lot while watching afterwards to the sequel series of Star Wars, right? And the sequel trilogy there, and how tumultuous that was, we'll say, to choose maybe one of the lesser negative adjectives. Like, yeah, I just think that it's sort of interesting to see the shift the entire industry would take, kind of following the footsteps of this movie, but usually probably done worse. I think the movie's pretty good, right? Like, I think a lot of the issues that people have with the movie are sort of largely unfounded, right? Like, I think Shia LaBeouf is pretty good in the movie, right? Like, I think they don't think he deserves the hate he has. And I think part of that is maybe because, obviously, with the hindsight of 15 years, which is in itself crazy to think about that it's been that long since the movie came out, we know that he didn't become the next Indy, right? If there wasn't a sequel series built around him, like it sort of alludes to possibly happening. And so you just get this one-off with him that I think you can sort of enjoy.
Yeah,
I think
just real quick on that, some of the trivia was basically like he burned his bridges doing like
Sure.
press and talking about the movie, basically like saying, yeah, at the end of the day, like other people, played a role in this, but at the end of the day, I couldn't bring swinging through the vines with monkeys, I couldn't make that good. And he said that's on him, and basically talked about how like he like talking about the problems of the movie, basically like burned his bridges with Spielberg, who he'd really looked up to, burned his bridges with Harrison Ford, Harrison Ford was like, I've worked on things I didn't like, but I go out there and I sell the thing. That because that's part of my job. So yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I like Shia, and I actually like his and Harrison's chemistry quite a bit. It's interesting to hear, I think it was the screenwriter talk about how, like, they tried to make this as, like, not as dark as the second one, have the mix of comedy and adventure the first one, and less comedic in the third one. I think if that's what he was going for, he wildly misswung.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is pretty easily the most comedic of the four movies. And really, I think it's sort of interesting because Indy as a whole, Temple of Doom is this weird outlier, right? Like, all of the other three movies we've seen now to this point feature the same lettering for the title introduction. They all feature Indy as a professor in college. They feature some combination of Brody or Salah or Marion, right? Like, they have these kind of tentpoles of things that are built around them, and this one obviously continues in that vein. I think this is very clearly a sequel to Last Crusade, and the style of movie it tried to be. They give a very lovely moment actually to the actor who played Brody, and obviously to Sean Connery, who in real life was still alive but had retired by now, and give a very, I think, lovely moment to those two actors and their performances, which was really nice. I think where it misses though is that we obviously all ranted and raved about Last Crusade for like 2 hours last week, so go check that pod out. But I think Last Crusade is sort of the perfect indie movie because it is sort of that perfect combination of action adventure, humor, and lighthearted kind of joy to it that really makes it, I think, swing, with it being the most emotional and like heartfelt movie in the series as well. And I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull doesn't really nail the emotion and the heart that Last Crusade had at all. But with the, I think, benefit of 15 years of hindsight, I like what they at least attempt to do, even if it doesn't nail it. Or like they tried to carry over the same father-son relationship that Last Crusade had. It doesn't work as well. Part of that is just because Shia LaBeouf is not Sean Connery, admittedly, but and they try to hide the fact they're father and son for half the movie. But I still like those moments, right? And I think Shia LaBeouf and Harrison Ford have good moments and have good chemistry. I love Marion. I think she brings a lot of fun and humor to the film as well. A lot of the cons that you guys have talked to, I agree with, right? So the CGI is rough. Like Cameron said, really any CGI from this era is probably going to be dicey at best. The fridge scene's bad. I mean, it's dumb, right? Like, there's really no argument around it. The jungle scene to me is sort of the most hot and cold, kind of rapidly bouncing from one to the other, right? Like, I like chunks of that jungle chase sequence. Like, the chase itself is really good, I think. I don't like Mutt and Spelko fencing over the cars that much. Obviously, I don't like Mutt swinging through the vines. I don't like it when James Bond does it. I don't like it when Indiana Jones does it.
I definitely, I had a flashback to that Bond movie and was like, do they throw the Tarzan scream in this one too? No,
they did do the Tarzan scream.
They at least had some restraint there.
But
they replace it with the far worse monkeys swinging with him.
Yeah, the giant ant scene, I think I like as an idea better for another movie, but not as much necessarily for like an Indiana Jones film. And then to me, I've said it for 15 years. I still think it's true to this day. To me, the biggest issue of the movie is always going to be the aliens. I just don't think it works for me. And it's also as a sneak peek to probably next week's, that new site review of Dial of Destiny. My biggest worry for that movie, as well as it doing like time travel shit. Like I just think these are elements that don't vibe with Indiana Jones and its sort of mythology as much for me. I think it breaks it more than it helps it.
Which is a very weird sentiment, given that like the historical objects have had spirits that come flying out of a chest and just kill bodies. It's had a person that can stick his hand in somebody, rip out their heart, and then the chest seals up. And then we've had like a literal life-giving.
But I think as like ridiculous as those might be, like I still think there's a level of like groundedness to it, and part of that might just because at least for the Lost Ark and Holy Grail, those are such like ancient devices, right? Like where like that mythology is well established, I guess, is maybe part of it, because like it is so like well established. These are like mystical things, right? Versus like the Crystal Skull doesn't have the mythology around it, right? And I don't know what they're gonna do for the Dial of Destiny, but time travel is always, I think, sketchy and hard to do, even in the best circumstances. And so yeah, I think that's part of it, right? I mean, I think there's a level of a lack of fully committed to it, even on the film's part, even going as far as to not commit to calling them aliens, right? Or like spacemen, right? And so I think that's part of it. But the whole thing is just sort of weird at the end. And I think it is really sort of where the movie sort of wobbles a bit. But I like quite a bit up until then, right? I like the chase sequence in the college town quite a bit, actually. I think it really holds up well. I even, haven't had the benefit of haven't watched Last Crusade again. The like glance of like unimpressedness that Indy gives Mutt is so reminiscent of like his dad given to Indy, and I really loved that small touch. Right? Like there's like these small seeds that they have in this film, connecting it to Raiders and Last Crusade in particular, that I really enjoyed here. Even the, tiny little like flash of the Lost Ark, I didn't mind as much as I did when I first watched it. I was like, oh, that's a nice little gesture, right? And I liked the opening movie of them just like kind of having a drag race. It's very American Graffiti, and I really enjoyed Lucas getting to kind of have some fun with that. Like the movie's flawed, right? And we'll get into it. It's obviously not going to be any of our favorite Indiana Jones movies. It's definitely a step down from Last Crusade and Raiders, but I'm pretty happy with it, right? And like it would definitely be a movie that like, if it's on TV again, I wouldn't mind just kind of leaving it on while I kind of do stuff, right? Like I do think it is not as bad a movie as people think it is. I think a not insignificant amount of that might just be the fact that in the ensuing 15 years, you've had a lot of really bad sequels and spin-off things. And with that benefit of hindsight, this one is ultimately just sort of like, you know what? Like, it's not what I would have done, but it's also, it's not that bad. It's not that offensive to the kind of legacy of Indiana Jones.
I did, when you started mentioning that this was like one of those first ones that was like the long awaited sequel kind of thing. One of the articles I found was like, worst legacy sequels kind of thing, or like, 10 long awaited sequels that didn't live up to the hype.
I'm sure it's on the list.
Crystal Skull is basically the first one in that list. I don't think it's like a ranked list. It's just a list. Zoolander 2, which I know you also have feelings about, was the second one.
My least favorite movie, certainly my least favorite comedy ever. That was a dispiriting movie theater experience. All four of us who went to that movie.
Yeah. Of the things, this is a Collider article, but of the 10 movies that they list, the only one prior to Indiana Jones was Terminator 3. From 2003.
And that's not necessarily even like a legacy sequel. Terminator, again, sort of like Mission Impossible, they all just have these giant gaps in between those movies. But Terminator 3 is rough. I won't deny that.
Yep. All right. Well, let's dive into any favorite moments or least favorite moments anybody wants to jump to.
I'll leap in here real quick. Things I love about this movie. The chasing at the beginning with the American Graffiti type drag racing.
I I was less bothered by it, but also I'm annoyed by the fact that like the drag race happens and then like it ends and we cut to them like showing up at the military base and the whole convoy is right behind them. So it's not that like the lead car actually did a drag race with the other people.
I didn't notice that. I did
like
not
everybody else is just right there. So it's just like that's just like, what was the point?
To have fun. To show the teenage American spirit, man.
Hell yeah.
And also show off that it was in the 1950s now.
Yeah.
That very much dates it 1950s between the outfits, the attitude, and the drag, like that cements it there for me. I love that. I love the entire base up until the the rocket car is probably the last moment that I enjoy out of that first section. After that, I really do enjoy kind of like the Red Scare, FBI investigating, blackballing him from academia. I love that we're introduced to this new dean and we're like, oh, this new dean's such a pushover, firing Indy, and then he reveals that in solidarity he resigned with for Indy. It's like, okay, cool. We like this guy. We won't see him until the end, but we like him. But then we get all that. You get the whole thing with Mutt, and really enjoyed just kind of like introducing Mutt and kind of been like, yeah, my mom's married. And when I watched it in theaters, I didn't pick up on it. I was like, that is like, yeah, it totally is setting it up perfectly. There's so many nods to it that it's like, yeah, this is your kid. He's very much like a young Indy incarnate. But what I love is he comes off initially goes, yeah, I'm a lower kid, like this, that. And then it turns out he's
Mutt. He's named after the dog.
Yeah, he's named after the dog. It's so good. But he brings up this like idea of, oh, I'm this like rough greaser kid. But in reality, he went to prep schools and he fences and he like all these things that show off that he is actually like, it very much is. Indy comes off as this adventurer, this gruff guy, but he really is an intellectual, an archaeologist, a teacher, a professor, somebody who cares about, like, he's a nerd. And it's like this nerd, like really nerdy side being covered up by this adventurous side and then being two halves of the whole. And we don't get, like, we get to see kind of that introduction we got in Raiders of the Lost Ark from Indy, but with Mutt this time around. And I love that. The soda pop joint scene is fantastic.
Yeah.
The jocks versus the greasers spilling out into the streets, the chase across campus, they crash the bike, and the student goes, "Oh, Professor Jones, can I ask you to," and he goes, well, you're doing it wrong. He goes, you got to get out. And as they're like getting up on the motorcycle and driving away, he says, if you want to do so, like, you want to get some real archaeology done, you got to get out of the library, which is a fun nod to what he said the first time, where 70% of archaeology is done in a library. And it's just like such a fun continuation. It's like, yep, he is a professor. This is fun. And then we just like, it goes off to the races from there. I love everything through that like first chunk of the movie up until probably the Amazon.
Except for the Nuketown.
Nuketown, yeah, but that's like Nuketown, USA is the one problem, that first like section of the movie that I think is just absolutely stellar. Shia LaBeouf and Harrison Ford have a fantastic chemistry. It really builds up Mutt as a really good sidekick to Indy. And that, like, I think that continues throughout the film. I really enjoyed Mutt this time. Last time I was like, oh, cool, Shia LaBeouf. And then I'm like, oh, but he's Indy's son. And I still think that everything from, and it's a sad point because up until the reveal in it's not quicksand. Specifically, it's not quicksand. I love that. Everything up to that point, I really enjoyed. And then we get into the Amazon chase and no, like just about everything about that Amazon chase, I hate. I hate the convoy. It's overlong. It's ridiculous at certain points. I will say I do like the fencing on the cars. Because the only reason I like it is because Marion's in the driving and telling him how to do it,
giving him notes,
Riposte. It's not a match, Mom.
Yeah.
Which once again shouts out to like, this is him with Ox and with Marion, and you get a look at what his childhood was like, and it's really fun. And it's really great in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Indy being like, yeah, you don't have to go to school. You can drop out of school. That's fine. And then he goes, and you're going back to school.
Yeah.
What? You said I didn't have to. That's before you were my son.
Yeah.
So good.
I that's where I fall on the, like, I really enjoy the dynamic between Indy and Mutt. I think there's a lot of fun. I think there's like the excitement that they have, that both of them have, like sharing what they know in that like malt shop scene is a lot of fun. With Mutt in particular, and also shout out one of the trivia things, Mary Williams is named for John Williams, of course, legendary composer of the series.
Oh.
But yeah, I love, and it also obviously allows for the fake out of, you know, it not being Marion Ravenwood. So yeah, the problem was, I think a lot of that had been like spoiled in like marketing materials and stuff beforehand.
Oh yeah.
But another element that I really liked this time around, and I think I've probably just appreciate more from Shia LaBeouf when he gets to be dramatic and chooses to be really dramatic, is like the heartbreak that you see in his eyes, and him like
in the cell
tearing up anytime he sees how like what has happened to Ox, and like how far gone he is, and just like this is his father figure. This is the guy who's been his dad pretty much his entire life, and like seeing how like torn he's been, like he's like he's distraught from that, and also like sees that, and then immediately sees Indy offering to help the Russians kind of thing in that, like in the camp scene. And so finally, like he just
he
kicks
snaps.
things off and leads them into the not quicksand stuff. So I think like he's impulsive, but he's impulsive for the right reasons.
100%.
And so yeah, like I really enjoy the dynamic. I also am a fan of the sword fight. If only, I mean, I think it's a fun little thing, but I think it's also a fun callback to, it got, you know, it was a setup earlier that, yeah, he was a prep school. He can fence, so he can hold his own. And there's a reason he can hold his own against Irina. Like the combo of, well, neither of them are used to fighting on moving vehicles. And he's, you know, doing his best to hang on, I think is it's a nice little payoff for that little character introduction moment earlier in the film. Going back to the opening sequence, there's a fun nostalgia to how the movie is playing up, like the imagery and stuff like that. And like one of the first things you saw in the trailers for this movie was that moment of like the fedora on the ground and the music swelling and him picking it up and you seeing the silhouette. So that was like the first thing we ever saw of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and still seeing it in the movie is still like I know this is just like playing on my emotions, but it still works. I still enjoy it. It's still,
the musical cues in this movie are really good too.
Yeah. And the thing that I remember not liking the first time, and it's still like, I still struggle with it a little bit this time, but I also realize they've pretty much all been like this, is like this introduction to like Indy and Mac, setting up this history between these two characters as if like it's established and known to the audience, which obviously it is not. Just feels like weird as a introduction to these characters, as opposed like it gets like sprinkled out throughout the rest of the movie, the work they've done together, but like we don't even get to see them working together before immediately Mac like betrays him. That I'm just like, I don't like that beat. Like
I think and that's the difference, I think, is that versus like Brody or like Salah, who like hits the ground running with him in Raiders, like they just get to be friends. You get to see them sort of have this relationship play out, versus here they're together for like 2 minutes and then he immediately turns on him. So you never get to see them just sort of be on the same side really ever again in the movie. Because even when he's on Indy's side at the end, he's doing it as a double or triple agent, right? And so it's not really fair. And it also helps that like Max sucks. Like he
Yeah.
fucking sucks.
Max
It's
sucks.
like that's part of the issue anyways. That like it's like why would you hang out with this guy? He blows. Like it's not like Brody or Salah or I mean obviously his dad, but like he's just a character who or like he just sucks. Like he's not enjoyable to be around anyway. And so it makes it that much harder to be like, cool, I want to know more about this relationship because like I kind of need to ditch him anyway.
For me, it's a big part of it was I wish they would have just kept it that he's a greedy son of a bitch.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't need him to be like double agent, triple agent.
Yeah.
I think it would have just been Mac, why are you trying to help us? It being like, because you're my friend and I can't,
That's
and
all I need.
I saw what they were doing with the skull with you and I just couldn't I didn't know that they were going to do that to you. I've never seen anything like that. Like you could have done a million things to give him like a change of heart in that moment and then have a failure of character moment with the gold room. And
Sort
I
of
think
like
that
Last
would have
Crusade
worked
a little bit, right? Where she gets tempted at the very end by the
exactly.
Holy Grail.
I think that would have carried out a lot better. But I don't care for like the double agent, triple agent thing out of it. I just think it would have been Mac's not really a bastard. He just has an inherent flaw of he's greedy as hell.
Yeah.
And also on that flip side, he said at the very beginning, like, why would you do this? He goes, one is like, I'm not betraying my country, Indy, I'm betraying your country, but also would have also been a good flip of like, I'm in debt, man. I'm a capitalist. I'm deep in debt. I got to do what I got to do.
And my issue with it is that they sort of try to have like the best of like both worlds in it, right? Because like they sort of step their foot in the direction at the end of like, oh, he just cares about like the gold, and that's what he's here for. But like they don't fully commit to it, and then everything that's exploding, and then he gets like this like heroic moment of self-sacrifice to like let them go, and it's like you haven't earned this moment with either Indy or the audience. So like when it happens. I'm just, and I've seen that moment a lot, and it's when it happens, I'm always just like, it doesn't do anything for me there. Like, okay, like whatever.
I wouldn't have had the reference point back in 2008, but since we also did the National Treasure stuff, it's the Ed Harris like ending in National Treasure too.
Yeah,
it's the exact same thing of like you haven't earned this. You shot people.
Well, you were the bad guy until right now. What are you talking about? Yeah, exactly.
And that like it's such a weird like self-sacrifice because it's like he's lazily grabbing a few like gold necklaces and stuff like that while the world is falling apart around
collapsing.
Him. Like, he clearly had to dive into a thing to escape that, and it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna grab a few things, gonna throw a necklace on, I'll be fine. And then like everybody starts running. He just is so unfazed.
And he watches them. Yeah.
I think that's part of that's the CG, like the CGI not being like a realistic thing that he could act on, but also on the flip side of that, he just shouldn't have gone into the other into the the actual like throne room. He should have stayed in the treasure room, and they should have come out, and he's decked out in gold, and he just can't stop gathering gold. And that would have been a better use of his character.
Down by it, maybe, right? He's too heavy with the gold to like stay like
he's getting caught by the gold and everything.
Yeah,
and then he has Indy's whip, and then at that moment he should have just been like, "Oh, I'm actually a bad person. I need to die and let go."
Yeah, I wish he had just said that specific line.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a bad person. I'm going to die now, Indy.
Something like that, or just that line, or it's like get at it, like you have to get at it, like it's that idea. One, I like the idea of Indy, like on paper, I like the idea of Indy being like always giving people another chance. Right. But after seeing him do that with a Nazi in the last movie, I'm over it. I'm done with him trying to give people the last shot. We saw him do it with what's her face in the second movie, ended the movie kissing her and stuff, and honestly shouldn't have given her a second shot either. She sucked. Nazi sucked.
That's true.
Max sucks.
Definitely true.
Yeah. I mean that like so much of the Mac stuff feels very like contrived because they were like, well, how do we how can we get the Russians to like know where they're going? And even like the way they do it of like, oh, he leaves these little beacons. It's like, all right, she picks up a beacon and then just miraculously knows to look up at the waterfalls coming out of eyes and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that must be where they went.
Yeah.
Like what? No, that
also,
that
how are they
makes
reading the
zero sense.
beacons? Like they don't show any equipment on how to read
Yeah.
the beacon.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
I-
They have a lot of shorthand that it's like, we're hoping the audience will just kind of like fill in the gaps.
Also, as they're going down, how did nobody notice he was dropping these massive fat beacons that look like industrial grade suppositories?
the do also loudly beep.
Yeah.
Like if they just blinked and there was like a silent element to it, he's at the back of the line. Like
Whatever.
He's dropping these things behind him. Like that's like the one time we see him drop it while with them. Like that's what we see. But yeah, the fact that like we also zoom in and audibly hear them, it's like somebody definitely would have like been like, what's that beeping? What? Hey Mac, what's that red blinking beeping light next to your foot?
Oh hey Mac, why are you blinking and beeping all over yourself? Because you're covered in trackers, huh? Like anything.
My
Like,
big
God, it's so bad.
thing about Mac 2, thinking about it a little bit more, is that I feel like it is a character that exists to give Indy a personal stake in the villains, right? Because his relationship with Spelko is super like non-existent. Like they barely clash with each other at all, right? Like
Yeah, no,
and
I mean
their-
she tortures
their
his ass,
chemistry's-
but that's it.
yeah, like their chemistry is very nothingness, right? And it doesn't have like the personal feud of like him and Belloc, or like the intensity of like, you know, the priest in Temple of Doom, or even like sort of the portrayal, all of the portrayals actually in Last Code. He's getting portrayed left and right in that movie by the bad guys, right? And here it's much more just like, yeah, she's a generic commie, right? And that's basically what's going on here. She's pretty crazy from the jump. There you go. And they're like, and Cate Blanchett, to her credit, is given very little to work with, like you said, and so
Yeah.
she gives a pretty bland performance because it's a bland character. And so like Mac, I think, is there to be like way more personality driven, way more of like, oh, here's Indy's connection to like why he cares at all really to the villains. But his character is sort of silly. But at least it gives Indy some involvement, right? Like it's a little similar to like we all like Mutt, which actually makes me happy to hear. But like he is such a like, to say thinly veiled is even giving it too much credit. He is just 1950s Marlon Brando, right? Like it is unabashedly
Dean, yeah.
like, yeah, or like James Dean, Marlon Brando,
Yeah.
in like Waterfront, right? Like he's that character, like, and just unabashedly, right? Like to like a comical amount, he's like, I'm a 50s greaser. Here's the comb. I gotta comb my hair. Like that's like the one character trait they gave him. And Shia LaBeouf was like, I can comb my hair. I can do that. And like that part, I always kind of roll my eyes at, but like he at least has so much other personality to him that it doesn't really matter. Whereas Cate Blanchett is just sort of like, you're a generic Russian and you don't really have any sort of quirks really. You don't really have any sort of personality to you really. And it's sort of unfortunate, but one thing I want to shout out that we haven't really talked on is the actual like final ending. I really like the wedding sequence. I think it's a nice, you know, way to end the story, right? Yet again, and like the, you know, moment of like Mutt picking up the hat and then getting it taken out of his hand by Indy was a good bit. You know, because I think a lot of us do think that like Last Crusade is sort of a perfect ending for Indy. I mean, it's literally him riding off into the sunset with his kind of fellow adventurers. It's like how you would envision Indy's story ending, just kind of riding off into the sunset. But if we can't have that as the ending, him getting married to Marion and having his like son there and all that kind of stuff is like another nice touch. And so I found that really enjoyable. I do like the ending quite a bit. Probably more than I'm gonna like it in Dial of Destiny, but we'll see.
We'll see.
But you know, I think it's a nice touch, right? And do I wish he could have just been with Marion from the jump? Yes, right. But with what we're kind of given for him, I like what we're given. And as myself and Cameron said for the prior movies, Harrison Ford, even at like 64, looks great in tweed. That man can wear tweed. He can wear it very well. He looks great in all of his like Professor Tweed outfits.
Him getting
Still.
married in tweed was awesome.
Yeah, hell yeah, it was. Yeah.
Also, shout out to like Shia trying to pick it up and put it on, and him just like snapping it away, saying "my
so
hat."
good.
Yeah, it's weird because obviously we also had Iron Man at this time, and it's the exact same beat of like I don't remember the guy's name, the guy who played Rhodey in the first one, being like next time, and then obviously nope. And then same here with Shia, obviously nope. So yeah, it's that same beat that both franchises would end up kind of unknowingly getting.
I haven't said that. Like, the last thing I'll say on it is that with the benefit of everything that's happened since then and kind of getting to watch it yet again, I don't think I would have hated if they had gone and done like a Mutt standalone film. Like, I think it could have worked, right? Like, I can't guarantee it would have been great, but like, I think it would be better than people thought at the time. Like, I enjoyed Mutt quite a bit in this movie. I think he's one of the best parts of the movie. And so like, I think it could have worked is all I will say.
I think the problem with that is you get into the problem that is Shia LaBeouf.
Sure.
Shia LaBeouf is like,
I mean, he was doing the Transformers movies at this time, so yeah, he would have been juggling two major franchises if they tried
two major franchises, but also like it's not too long after this, like until like the early 2010s, like early 2010s, you start to see like the mental health decline start showing up publicly. If you haven't seen it, there's the Amazon movie about that's like semi autobiographical, and it's like
but
he's not well.
It's also like a weird like how differently would his story in life had played out if other if he had been doing Indiana Jones stuff.
Right, yeah.
Also, I am realizing because I was curious, National Treasure 2 had come out at this point, so like it so Mac just has the Ed Harris thing. I didn't see National Treasure 2 at the time, so I didn't have that reference until we watched it for this.
I did. I thought it was fine.
But yeah, it very much is like, oh, you are just having the exact same character moment there. Because I was sitting here thinking like, in my head of like, okay, we didn't get Shia, but I was like, but is that when the National Treasure movies came in? And I was like, oh no, we did talk during the National Treasure movies of like, this was filling that Indiana Jones gap that hadn't been around since the late 80s. So yeah, it and then like obviously after this, like we get this in the form of Uncharted is where we get Indiana Jones.
I think it's really interesting that
after
this is in between Uncharted 1 and 2 in the timeline, right? And like you're sort of seeing the thing that this inspired. Like I said last week, you're seeing this thing that this inspired sort of existing alongside it now, right? I do like also, I guess this is for the last one, the fact that they like acknowledged the actual amount of time that had passed, right? Like Last Crusade is in 38. This one takes place in 57. That's a 19-year gap. 89 to 08 is a 19-year gap. Like they actually acknowledge time passing and we're just like, oh, it's been 5 years. He just had a rough 5 years. Like, no, like he's older now. And like they did acknowledge his age and they did acknowledge like the passage of time. And yeah, I think that's to its benefit as well.
Yeah. One of the things I saw in the trivia, I didn't dig too deep into this, but a lot of people point to the jungle sequence as like a CGI fest of just garbage, and it's like a lot of that, it like you can see from behind the scenes stuff, like a lot of it was a practical location shoot. Obviously, there are significant elements of it that are CG focused.
Yeah, the CGI element is too high, but yeah,
but it's not 100% CG as you would see like nowadays or something like that. Yeah. Or it's like I guess like a recent example we had, maybe it might be like Shang-Chi, where it was like, oh, that's just entirely going through a CG forest. But yeah, like I like again going back to like moments. I like, we already touched on it, but like the 180 that Indy makes when he learns that Mutt is his son, the fact that like that comes out when Marion thinks they're about to die, and doesn't think she's gonna have to deal with the ramifications of that,
which is a real Merriam-ass thing to do.
Yeah, you love to see it. I like the just say rope call it a rope.
Closes his eyes and like
yeah.
is barely holding on to it and it's like wanting to let go.
But very much being like, it's a not poisonous snake. It's just a snake. Like, they have some very fun moments with like how Mutt is similar to Indy and also how Mutt is very different than Indy.
Shout out to Indy or to Mutt using the ladder and it breaking on his way down and just falling, and then Indy just like takes the stairs.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you just love to see that. It's such a good moment. Like moments like that are great.
Yeah. The or Mutt like getting freaked out by the scorpions and Indy just being like, that's like the most probably overt callback to like Temple of Doom stuff of
bigger is better.
Bigger is better. You're fine.
Yep. Oh, also shout out to when Mutt goes, "You said you were a teacher, part-time." So good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I one thing I will also shout out, when they find the crystal skull and like they find like coins going to and the gold like attaching to it, I'm sitting there thinking, gold's not metallic. Like gold's not magnetic.
Yeah,
and so I very much appreciate that Mutt also calls that out. Like neither is gold. Like, so yeah, I did appreciate that the movie itself like was like, hey, yeah, this isn't a natural thing. It's not really magnetism in the traditional sense kind of thing.
Which you love to see it. Also, I would have thought that would have been an excellent thing where gold isn't attracted to it. And my thought was like, that's why the city's made out of gold. And it's like, nope, never mind. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong completely on that.
Yeah. Also, it's like, I think this was the first time I noticed the parallel between when they're breaking the stones to like pour the sand into the temple to like fall down and get into the temple, and like the pillars kind of like close up and turn into like a giant obelisk. Seeing that same design later in the alien ship itself was like, that's a cool like thematic parallel, but that like the ancient peoples had drawn from. And I also enjoy the moment where Indy kind of has an admiration for these interdimensional beings as fellow archaeologists and collectors. As dumb as it is.
It's so dumb, but it's like, it is great. He's like, they're archaeologists. It's like, or thieves and plunderers and like tyrants.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
But he doesn't see himself as that.
No, he doesn't.
I do appreciate that enough time has passed that like a couple call outs get made of like are you a grave robber, all that kind of stuff.
Like no, grave robbers will be shot, and good thing we're not grave robbers. It's like you're literally a grave robber. You're an archaeologist. You're a professional grave robber.
But also, who fucking left that sign there and did not do anything with the graves of not Cortez or whoever, like the
not Cortez,
the conquistador was and his men. Like who had left that sign there of like grave robbers will be shot.
They mummified him so tightly that now that we've cut it off, it deteriorates.
Yeah, he immediately starts to dissolve.
So good. Like here's the thing: is that dumb? Absolutely. But is it like 50 schlocky? Like
it's great.
Dumb? Yes, and I love it.
Yeah. Any final moments before we wrap up and dive into our grading of stuff?
Yeah, shout out to Miriam getting Indy in the end. She's the only one that's deserved him.
Yeah.
Everyone else, one was a Nazi and the other just fucking sucked.
Yeah. How about you, Logan? Any last thoughts from you?
No, I like Cameron's. It's not the highest bar you had to clear. Just don't be a Nazi, or Ridley Scott, and she fucking nailed it. You know what I mean? So very good.
To your point of the wedding scene, there were a couple of bits of trivia that were at one point in the script, Sala and Short Round were like included in that scene as like cameos.
Oh, that'd have been nice.
I didn't see anything about like if Q Hui Kwan was ever like approached for it. John Rhys Davies was and declined to return because he thought it would be like too much of a distraction for him to just pop up in this one last moment.
He's not wrong.
And I imagine like Q Hui Kwan had been long retired from acting by that point as well. It kind of been like had stepped away, so they probably didn't bother reaching out to him either. It would have been interesting knowing what we know now if he had popped back up. All right, then let's go ahead and dive into the report card where you grade from A plus to F. Cameron, I'll throw it to you first. What do you want to give Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
I think it's a B. I think it's just a solid B movie. I think that
That's definitely what it's aiming for.
yeah,
I was
I
gonna
think
say, yeah.
it hits where it hits, it misses where it misses, and there's enough of that I can't like. There are things about this movie that I love that I'm really attached to, and there are things about it that just like fall so goddamn flat that are and I'll like the biggest crime this movie has is that it has a really long boring chase scene in the Amazon chase scene. It's boring. I can barely tell what's going on around them. The truck, I don't know which convoy truck is which at certain points or where people are at positionally. It's just bad.
There's the moment where like when they're doing all the anthill stuff, like Marion like returns and I'm like, oh, that's right. She was in a completely different part of the jungle.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. It's not well done on that aspect. I think it's way too CGI heavy at certain points. And it's not, of course, we mentioned you just don't have good CGI in this day and age, or in that day and age.
Right.
But all that being said, the things that it does well, it nails really, really well. And I think that's what makes it a B for me.
All right. How about you, Logan?
Yeah, I'm on the border between a C plus and a B minus, right? I could kind of be swayed either way. I think a lot like Cameron said, the movie unquestionably is not as bad as people think it is. And like I would go as far as say like I encourage people to watch it again, right? And like with 15 years of distance from when it first came out, and like I think you will find things to enjoy this movie. Like the movie's not perfect, it's not the best Indiana Jones movie, but I do think it's a fun one, and I do think there's enough here to get a decent amount of enjoyment out of, right? I think it aims to kind of be inspired from those B movie schlocky 50s films and like sci-fi horror. And I think it largely does that well. I don't like the alien thing. It's always going to be kind of something stuck in my craw for it.
Yeah.
But I think so much up until then largely works. And I really, up until they get into the Amazon, I think the movie hums along at a pretty good pace and a pretty good kind of enjoyable time. So I like it. I'll say a C plus, but I think it's definitely worth checking out again.
Yeah, for me, it's a solid C. I think there's a moment, and this is a thing I've thought since originally seeing it. Like, I wonder if the alien thing would bother us so much if Lucas wasn't connected to it, and obviously Lucas having such a tie to aliens from Star Wars, obviously, and even like Spielberg with like E.T. the Extraterrestrial, like there's an element of like, I wonder if they had never done alien centric things, would that have been an issue for us? Obviously there's no way of like ever knowing or telling, but like, and also there's this degree of like, in this conversation of Indy coming back here in 2008, many fans of the other major series had been very let down from the prequels. So like, even going into Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there was like a sense of like, well, we've already seen Lucas ruin Star Wars. Do we want to see him ruin this? And I think like those initial feelings on the film, I think like that is an unavoidable element of the initial response to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Something that's awesome in the making of documentary is Lucas has a specific thing where he's like talking about Spielberg about that exact point about like people are not gonna like the movie just because we made it again, and like he had like sort of like prep Spielberg for that because Spielberg had, I think the only sequel Spielberg's ever done was Lost World. And he's like, yeah, like people are gonna hate this movie. You need to understand that just because the fact that it exists and it's not what the other ones were, they're gonna hate it. And like it's a really interesting insight into like, I think the lessons Lucas sort of pulled from that and him just being like, I want to tell the story I want to tell and people are going to hate that. And that's okay because I am George Lucas and I still get to tell the story, right? And you need to understand that, Steve, that like people are going to hate this because it exists. I'm okay with that. You need to be too. And like we're sort of being way more like reticent about that fact.
Yeah.
Yep. I will say I'm so glad that I rewatched it because this used to be my least favorite one.
It's definitely not.
And
Spoiler alert.
here's the thing, it's not the
Sneak
worst.
peek.
By a long shot,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
the worst. It's also,
Yeah.
like, is there some racism here? Yeah. Indy calls them Indians. Like, it's accurate for the time, but, but it's not as, like, obligatory and awful and terrible as, like, a dude in brown face and, like, all the, like, people
Throwing darts.
people of
There's
other
so much
colors
to pull from a
eat
Temple of
weird,
Doom.
gross
Right.
foods.
Right,
or
yeah.
any of the other, like, really awful racism in Temple.
Yeah.
It just is not also, like I said, if it wasn't for the fact that, like, there are some really big fall off moments for me, I would really enjoy this movie a lot more. And
Yeah.
I like quite a bit of it. I was really surprised how much I stopped playing Diablo to watch this movie. So yeah, I had a great time watching it. I think that, hey, it's not pirates, or it's not, we're not getting good, bad, good, bad. It's like we are breaking that kind of cycle on this, I think.
We got great, terrible, great.
Yeah, great, terrible, great, terrible, great. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive into our other little segments here. It belongs in a museum. Our ranking of the best artifacts. We have number 1, the Holy Grail. Number 2, the Ark of the Covenant. Number 3, the Cross of Coronado, and number 4, the Sankara stones.
We did that.
Where do we want to put the Crystal Skull?
I think it goes above the Sankara stones. Does it go above the cross? Is my question. Also, I don't think does this go in a museum. Technically, it's on a semi-living being's head. It probably shouldn't go in a museum. It was it should have been returned.
Which it was. I mean, it's the last for me. I mean, it's my least favorite of the, like, devices of any of the movies, for sure, like treasures, if you will.
It does have the magical ability to keep ants away.
I know. Yeah, like, definitely some of the magic around it. It's sort of silly, but yeah, I mean, it's my least favorite for sure. But it's neat. It's still neat. But it's definitely my least favorite of the various films.
Yeah, I'll throw it in.
Treasures.
I'll throw it in there last as well. So that's where we'll plop it there. It was going to be, for me, it was either going to be above or below the Sankara stones. Because again, like, the Cross of Coronado has no magical abilities, but it's also the only one that Indy actually obtains.
And also just like the personal, like, dynamic of that one too.
Yeah,
I enjoy it.
Most punchable Nazis at all. Obviously, we move into Rusky territory.
I forgot number 1.
Yes, number 1, Adolf Hitler. Number 2, Elsa. Number 3, Belloc. Number 4, Walter Donovan. Number 5, Vogel.
God.
Number 6, Tote. Number 7, Mola Ram. And number 8, Dieter. We have Spalko, Dovchenko, and Mac to add this time around. We're going to throw. I think we clearly all have, like, the most feelings about Mac, so we'll go with him last. Where do we want to throw Spalko on this list?
Bottom.
Yeah, I would agree. Right.
Both Nazis going bottom for me. Like, they're so
entities, really, and, like,
yeah, and also it's like, let's be fair. Ruskies aren't bad as Nazis, so when we're talking about the most punchable Nazis, they're much lower on that end.
Sure.
It's also interesting because, for as much as they talk about how smart Spelko is and how great of a fencer she is, she's fairly incompetent. Like, she is largely just having Indy do the work for her, like, literally to get the first alien, then to tell them what's going on with Ox, and then literally is just following the trail left by Mac. Like, it's not really the same dynamic of, like, Belloc is out Fox and Indy at points, right? Or, like, Elsa is helping to kind of, like, do double cross stuff and, like, get her and Donovan to, like, outfox Indy. And here it's just more of just like, I captured you, tell me where to go. And it's like just sort of a slightly less interesting dynamic to their relationship too.
Also, like, the worst thing they do, I mean, outside of gunning down, like, American soldiers at the beginning and the innocent people of the city.
And all the natives at the end, right?
Yeah, all the natives
a
at the
fucking
end.
mask of them.
There's no child slavery or human trafficking. There's no being a Nazi.
Nazis.
Like, it's hard to, like, they do bad guy things, but they don't come off as, like, real real bad guys.
Yeah.
I
are
mean,
too
again,
comedic.
like, so I named the segment like most punchable Nazis because obviously Nazis play a large role
Right,
in this.
no,
but this
but
is like a bad
you don't
villains
have to be a
list.
Nazi,
Like,
but they're not even good
they
bad
kill
villains.
a lot of people, as
Yeah.
you touched on. Walter Donovan doesn't really do that. Like that. So like Walter Donovan, while a Nazi in the film, isn't like out there murdering a ton of folks.
But he's a better villain than Spelko.
Yes,
right.
I agree.
Right.
I'm just saying, like,
no, I think that's
don't-
fair. Yeah.
Don't just like make the criteria. Well, they're not a Nazi, so they're going to
Oh, yeah,
immediately
for
go
sure,
below
yeah.
all of the Nazis.
No, but I think like that's the thing. Is like, yeah, they kill a lot of people. Yeah, they do. They're
You don't
bad
really
guys. They're
feel it,
certainly
though.
bad people.
Right.
But
Yeah.
as far as
Right.
like the emotional compellingness of Adolf Hitler's at the top of our list, kind of as a joke because he is the Nazi of Nazis.
Yeah.
So
Right.
and he's a
and
historical
he
figure.
popped up. So
he popped up. So we
we
can
can't
count him.
not put him at the top of the Nazi list.
Exactly.
Right.
Elsa
But, like,
really is the
Donovan-
best bad guy that we've gotten out of these movies, I feel. Because she also has that intrinsic emotional tie to Indy and everything else. I don't get that from them. The thing I think that is most interesting is she starts off this movie being like, I'm like a psychic, and then fails to be
Yeah.
a psychic at every single turn.
Right.
They're more played comedically, like in the Rocky and
yeah.
Bullwinkle cartoon, kind of communist,
Yeah. Kind
rather
of.
than like actual scary Ruskies.
Yeah.
That's a good observation, Cam. Yeah.
I had remembered or misremembered in a Mandela effect kind of thing. Like I had remembered her doing some kind of like mind trick on Indy.
Yeah.
And so when that doesn't happen in this movie, I'm like, where did I pull that from?
She just tortures him by like
Yeah.
exposing him to the skull.
Showing him
And
to the
that's
skull.
it. Yeah.
Even that torture scene is sort of just like,
It
okay.
is a weird acting moment for Harrison Ford, just being like in
Yeah.
restraints and doing like weird, like shaking his head
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like I
It's
gotta feel
hard
like,
to make it dynamic for an audience. It's just him looking forward, and it's like, okay, yeah.
yeah. Well, so if we're putting Spalko at the bottom of the list, I imagine Dovchenko is below her.
Yeah.
I don't.
Number
yeah.
10. So then the real one to actually consider, where do we want to throw Mac?
I don't know if I want to put Mac any much higher because it's not like
I
his
think-
betrayals are like emotional at any point.
I mean, I would like
Yeah.
of the
I would
list, I would put Mac above like Dieter and Molaram and Tote. Like
I would say that's
like,
good. Yeah.
Maybe
I
even
would
above
say,
Vogel. I would put him like
I
below
would-
Donovan, but
I'd put him.
I would say Mac and Molaram too, because like Molaram at least like he gets some like iconic moments, right? He's got that going for him.
Yeah, Mac doesn't really have any of those
Dieter's-
moments. I'd say he goes
Yeah,
under
Dieter's
Molaram
super.
for sure.
Dieter's whatever. Mac's definitely ahead of Dieter, but I maybe below Molaram just because Molaram gets
I think Molaram's a better,
like some
better villain.
Yeah, moments.
all right. That's so I am outvoted there. So we'll go ahead and throw Mac there at number 8.
Would you have put him above Molaram?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I would have like, and this like Logan and I did this in a lot of the Bond rankings where we ranked the villains in that one too. Of like there's like your main bad guys that are usually going to take like
Right.
the top spots on the list, and then there's like the henchmen that usually fall below. You have to be like a very impressive henchman to like climb above main baddies, or just a really bad main villain to kind of slip through. So like Mac being the one, well, he's not the main baddie here, and Spalko is. He is, as we touched on, he's the one that like Indy has the personal connection to, and that is like the
And he's got a
betrayal.
personality.
So like
Right,
he's
right.
for all intents and purposes, he's the main bad guy.
Yeah.
So that's where like I would have thrown him. He's the weakest of the main bad guys, so I would have thrown him. And like Molaram, I just don't want to give any flowers to Temple of Doom, so I would have put him below. I would have put him below Donovan. Basically, is where I would have had him on this list, above Vogel, who's like the top of our right hand man henchman kind of guys. But I will take the being outvoted on that one.
We had some good sidekicks.
Up to our best sidekicks. We have at number 1 Professor Henry Jones Sr.
Hell yeah.
That we now gotta throw in there. We have Short Round at number 2, Marcus Brody at number 3, Marion at number 4, Sala at number 5, and then way down the list we've got Elsa at number 98 and Willie Scott at number 99. So we have Mutt, Marion, and Oxley to revisit. So first things first, I guess we'll throw Marion. Do we want to? Does her outing in this adventure move her up above Marcus Brody or Short Round or anybody? Or do we keep her there at a comfortable number 4?
I think
I think she
keep her.
I think she might go above Marcus Brody at this point.
That's where I lean. I lean like Marcus Brody is fun comedic, but he's also highly incompetent and doesn't really do anything good as a sidekick. So
does
like,
kill somebody.
No,
yes, he did.
He kills a lot of
He
people,
does
yeah.
accidentally kill somebody in
I have no issue with that. Like, I think for me, I'm okay with it either way. With her saying there, right? Like, it's we like I like Marion a lot. In this movie, I like Marion a lot in general. I think Indy's sidekicks are like sort of like pretty uniformly across the board. Great sidekicks, even in bad movies. I just think Marion is sort of in this particular film probably outshone by her son. But I have no issue with bringing Marion up a spot. Marion's great.
All right. Well, speaking of her son, where do we want to throw Mutt? I'm leaning towards above Marcus Brody for Marion. So moving Marion up to number 3 behind Short Round and Sean Connery. So where do we want to throw Mutt? Does he surpass Marion in his lone outing, or?
I think maybe he does for me.
I think he does as well for me as well. There's something I think there's something really good about Indy being the parental figure.
Yeah.
There's something really great about that, and maybe it's the aspect of him being a professor and teacher, that he's an educator and he's fun to learn from. And getting to see where he learns that, like, what people learn from him is really good. I think that Mutt has an advantage on the kind of information he can get and like also deliver back on being an adult. That might give him like a lot of leeway towards being over Short Round, but there is something for me that I just don't know if I think the chemistry of Short Round and Indy can get beat by Mutt and Indy's chemistry. I think that there is something just intrinsically down to like a chemical element of when Indy and Short Round are sharing the screen together, it's fun. And even when Short Round is doing the things like little shitty kid characters do, I'm delighted by it. Dumb lines like when he pushes them up against the wall and he goes, I didn't do, like, you did that, not me. Like, normally when kids do that, I'm like, that doesn't matter. But I really, like, that had a good comedic beat to me for some reason. I think there's something about K.K. Kwan, even as a child actor, just having, like, this innate chemistry with Indy. That is one why I'm sad that he's not back for Dial of Destiny or in any of the other films, because I think that chemistry is just so solid because you see them interact as people and you realize that it's them as human beings having that chemistry. And Mutt, as much as I like Mutt as a character, I like what Mutt does, I like what Mutt brings, I like that it turns out like that twist that we get of Indy's character when all of a sudden he realizes there's a human being he's responsible for, that he has to take this a lot more seriously. There's aspects that I love, but I don't know if it tops that just like that fun, adventurous chemistry that you just get down to its bones. Short Round shows up being Indy's driver. And he has blocks attached to his feet so he can drive. Like, there's something so outrageously and there's so much lunacy around that. But at the same time, I love that Indy's best friend, best partner, like, and best, like, supporting character on his side has been this short little kid, but he's awesome and I love it. And I just don't know if I can put Mutt above Short Round. I think he does go above Marion though.
It sounds like you're pretty much on the same vein there, Logan. I will say I would put Mutt above Short Round. In part, yes, Ki Hui Kwan is great. He is also a lot of those annoying 80s kid things that we got. And I think Mutt as a character gets to showcase more sides of Indy than Short Round did.
Sure.
Like, there is Indy the Professor to Mutt. We didn't really get Indy the Professor at all in Temple of Doom. He has a little bit of
literally
like,
not at all
stuff talking to like, and he's never like in professor mode, but he is obviously like expounding and giving the exposition when talking to the shaman of the tribes and stuff like that, and translating for Willie and stuff like that. So I think like we just get to see more layers to Indy as a result of the sidekickness of Mutt. And again, I like Shia LaBeouf's performance there.
Yeah.
I love Mutt as the like anti-Indy, but who's obviously also Indy, much like Indy was the anti-Henry Jones Sr., but obviously so much like his own father. That like there's a fun continued through line of that character. So I would personally put him above Short Round, but
what I would say is that I actually largely agree with Trevor. I probably like Mutt more than Short Round. Ultimately, like I'm okay having Short Round first because Cameron loves Short Round, and I'm totally down for that. And I do think Short Round is the best part of Temple of Doom, like that dynamic between him and Indy. I am someone who admittedly, like, again, I talked a lot about the fact that, like, I think the dynamic between Indy and his dad, which is like the heart and soul of Last Crusade, is so special. Those two actors in particular have such like weirdly good chemistry as a father and son, even though they're only like 10 years apart in each other's age. But they just do it so well. And I think the dynamic between Harrison Ford and Shia LaBeouf, or Ki Kwan, either way, it's not as good as it is, I think, in Connery and Ford's case, but it's still really good in both the cases. I think Shia LaBeouf gets way more to do because they're actually exploring a genuine father and son relationship here. I think it's sort of hamstrung by the fact that they don't reveal that fact until midway through the movie. I wish it had just been his son from the jump, and he's, you know, the disappointing son, just like Indy was, kind of thing. And I'd been more, I think, okay with that because you can just kind of hit the ground running sooner. But I think that relationship is really good and is sort of like slept on when people talk about this movie. But ultimately, Short Round can be second because shot to Cam.
all right.
Each guy.
Then lastly, we have Oxley to add to our list. For me,
I think this might be unanimous.
I put him below Sala.
I would agree.
Yes.
Above Elsa and Willie Scott. But
Absolutely, yeah.
It's and that it is John Hurt's great, but
Yes.
they make him such a nothing character for most of the movie that it's like, all right, well, you didn't give this person a character. He was a MacGuffin basically.
Yeah.
And when he does turn into a
back
character,
from that.
he's an interesting and fascinating character. Like,
for the two lines that he delivers.
we're just absolutely robbed of this really interesting character who can be a bridge dynamic between Mutt and Indy as like that, and also like when Miriam says, why do you think Ox stopped talking to you? Like, you ran off, and like basically like that being like a dynamic as well. Like that could have also been brought up. Like Indy gets a lot of quick forgiveness for like running out on Marion a week before their wedding. Granted, it's been 20 plus years. But like,
they also don't say what the reason was either. So like, I my thing with Ox is two things. The first is that I think he's more interested in the impact he has on other people, right? So like the effect you can see just saying his name has on Indy, or it has on Marion, or in particular it has on Mutt. And like, again, like Shia LaBeouf like actually like crying multiple times in the movie watching Ox, I found to be really effective. And like the movie's like emotional high points pretty much routinely. The second thing is that even like the few brief couple lines we get of Ox at the end just reminds me of like, man, this would have like, it sort of gives me the glimpse of like what it would have been like if we'd had Abner in any of these movies and not just mentioned. Like it sort of like feels like that similar like punch of like impact he has on like the characters around him. And so it also makes me regret that we just didn't get him as Abner Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark or the flashback of Last Crusade.
Yep. All
Yep.
right. Then moving over to our ultimate rankings for Indiana Jones. I imagine there's another one we're all pretty much unanimous on that this is going to go in third behind Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but above Temple of Doom.
Yes.
This is
It is not the worst Indiana Jones movie. Yeah.
Agreed.
Nope. And here's the thing: prior to seeing Temple of Doom for the second time, and prior to seeing this, I would have said, I don't know who we'll see, but absolutely not. Nope. Absolutely not. Like, holy crap, this movie's leagues better than Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
I would gladly watch this one again, and I will not say the same for Temple of Doom, right? And so, yeah.
I will fast forward through the Amazon chase scene, cutting a third of this movie out and enjoying all of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Extra credit. Other suggestions if you like this. This is the first one that just jumped Adventures of Young Indiana Jones up to the top of the list.
Hell
but
yeah.
then after that, of course, Raiders of the Lost
Get
Ark,
ready,
Temple
boys.
of Doom, and Last Crusade. And then our other 4 weird little stalwarts on here of Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, National Treasure, and National Treasure Edge of History. Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus?
Not on Disney Plus, but I learned that King of the Hill is on Hulu, and I've been watching that.
There you go.
You still can't get me to watch Hulu. Not even King of the Hill can win that.
I will say I did, in large part because I realized, Secret Invasion started coming out this
I
week.
watched that, yeah.
So I did watch the first episode of that, and then also after watching this, one of the things that popped up in my because you watched blah 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 was Anastasia, which I loved and was taken off Disney Plus for a time at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict, because Disney Plus was like, we don't want to suggest we're showing support for Russia, but at some point they threw it back on, so I saw it pop up there.
That's a weird sentiment to have about the film Anastasia.
It very much was, yeah. But so I did watch. I didn't watch all of it, but I did throw it on and enjoyed the opening a little bit and stuff like that.
Got some good Rasputin and Bartok moments in there.
Yep.
You love to see them.
Yep, got a little bit Rasputin, who is. If you ever see the stage musical version of the based on the film, Rasputin completely cut from the movie or the musical version of it, and instead it is a young Bolshevik whose dad was part of the
Bolshevik uprising.
Yeah, the antagonist is the son of one of the soldiers who was killing the Romanovs that night, and basically he encounters Anastasia and is like, I have to finish my father's work, but also I'm attracted to this woman and whatnot. So yeah, they just completely get rid of Rasputin. It's a far more interesting conflict to have than Magic Rasputin and his talking bat, but it is also I
don't know, man. You get Lich Rasputin with his phylactery and everything. I don't know how you can top that. Although I will say, animation-wise, we're talking about animation. The CG animation in Anastasia, woof.
I mean, still it's Don Bluth is also the animator on it. It's that era of stuff. So
the animation's good, but the CG animation's just ugh.
But also some bangers on the soundtrack there.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so yeah, those are the other things I watched, and I think maybe next week we'll do, since I don't really want to dive into a Young Indiana Jones episode, just to fill out the month. I think Secret Invasion episode 1 will probably be our episode for next week's That D Plus show, and then we'll dive into something else come July. Maybe we'll do the Spider-Man movies. Who knows? But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining me to discuss Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. You can follow Logan at LeftyLogie, Logggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
Go check out That Nerdy Site Show. Trevor and Cameron have been knocking out a lot of spoiler casts recently.
Yeah.
And those are always a lot of fun. Everyone always enjoys those, recording them and getting the chance to kind of talk about the things you've been playing or watching recently. This last one they would have done, I believe it was, The Flash.
Yep.
So go check that out. But they've also done Tears of the Kingdom spoiler cast. They've done Jedi Survivor spoiler cast, I think, now.
Yep.
So check out the last couple of weeks worth of episodes. You get some good spoiler casts to go stock
Spider-Man
up and
across
across
the Spider-Verse.
Spider-Man across Spider-Verse is that's another one as well. Thank you.
Yep. You follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's, 2 T's. What do you want to give a shout out to there, Kim?
I want to give a shout out to, speaking of Jedi stuff, Jedi Fallen Order. My Let's Plays are coming to an end soon. Episode 16 just went live. We're closing into the finale. So if you haven't checked those out, go check those out. I will say this last episode is...
This was your turning point where you were like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, this is the episode where you see me make that final turn, where I'm just like, this isn't just a game I'm playing to play and get ready for another game. It is, I come completely full circle on Cal Kestis as a character. There are incredible pivotal moments that happen in this episode. that completely turned me around on this game and on this narrative and this character. So
Very cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter, and I will shout out, in the vein of Let's Plays, my ongoing Tears of the Kingdom Let's Plays on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This week we did the Gerudo Valley stuff and the last of those kind of like regional phenomena episodes. So you can go find those, and we will be continuing on next week. Well, I think we got like I need to go in and like edit the rest of the episodes. I think I've probably got 4 or 5 episodes left, so stay tuned for that. And then maybe Cameron and I will have to bite the bullet and go back to Elden Ring. Who knows?
Fire Giant.
Yeah. Or maybe I'll just be like, screw it, I'm not doing Let's Plays anymore. I'm just going to enjoy the crap out of Final Fantasy 16.
There you go.
Who knows? You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, subscribe, like, share, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other. Class dismissed, and do 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 do.